I started waking up groggy, not tired, drugged. That's the only way I can describe what began happening 3 months ago. The strange fog that settled over my evenings wasn't natural tiredness from long days at the engineering firm. This was something heavier, artificial, clinging to me like a second skin. I'd wake with my mouth dry and thoughts scattered like broken glass. Emily had explanations for everything. "You're stressed from the Peterson project," she'd say, running fingers through my hair with practiced concern. "Middle age catching up. Maybe see doctor. Henry about your sleep issues." But there was something in her tone. Too helpful, too concerned, like a salesman overselling a rusted car. The kind that makes your gut twist. Small inconsistencies started appearing. My coffee mug in the dishwasher when I'd left it on the counter. Waking up facing the window when I always slept toward Emily. The guest room door closed when I'd left it open. "You're imagining things," Emily would laugh. "You were half asleep. People don't remember everything when they're exhausted." She was right about exhaustion. But not the kind from 60-hour weeks. This was bone-deep fatigue of someone fighting a war he didn't know he was in. The worst part wasn't the grogginess. It was the doubt. 8 years of marriage teaches you to trust your partner's reality, especially when your mind operates through thick syrup. Emily's explanations made surface sense. Work stress, getting older, sleep apnea requiring medical intervention and understanding wives. But my instincts screamed something different. The kind of wrong that settles in your gut like a swallowed stone. I began paying closer attention, fighting through pharmaceutical haze that descended every evening around 9. Emily would bring tea, a bedtime routine she'd started months ago, claiming chamomile would help my sleep troubles. She'd watch me drink it with nurse-like attentiveness. "Drink it while it's warm," she'd say, settling beside me. "It works better that way." The tea tasted fine, slightly bitter, but chamomile always was. Emily would curl up afterward, more affectionate than she'd been in months. More physical, asking about my day with interest that felt simultaneously genuine and calculating. But there was distance in her eyes, like performing intimacy rather than feeling it. 3 weeks ago, I started noticing sounds. Soft creaks after I'd drifted off. The whisper of the back door opening, so quiet I almost convinced myself it was the house settling. Emily's breathing beside me, too controlled for deep sleep. When I'd stir, she'd immediately respond with sleepy reassurances. "Just the neighbors, honey." But her voice was too alert for someone unconscious moments before. The breaking point came Tuesday night. I woke around 2 with familiar pharmaceutical fog, but something had jarred me awake. The house felt different. Occupied in ways that had nothing to do with Emily sleeping beside me. Emily's breathing was artificial, forced rhythm people use when pretending to sleep. In the distance, the soft click of a door closing. Not our front door, something deeper. The guest room. The next morning, Emily was making pancakes and humming, unusually cheerful for someone who claimed poor sleep because of my tossing and turning. The guest room bed was unmade, sheets tangled. When I mentioned it, Emily's explanation came too quickly. "I couldn't sleep, so I moved there around midnight. You were snoring loudly." Except I'd never been a snorer, and Emily had never mentioned it in 8 years. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of confronting Emily with half-formed suspicions, I chose the methodical approach of a man who solved problems with evidence rather than emotion. I researched hidden camera systems online, studying specifications with the same attention I'd use for structural engineering projects. Wireless models with night vision, motion-activated recording, cameras small enough to hide but sophisticated enough to capture everything. My house's layout spread across my mind like I was planning a heist. The hallway to the guest room, the kitchen where Emily prepared my tea, the back door that seemed to open on its own during my chemically induced sleep. The first camera arrived Friday via express delivery, no bigger than a thumb drive, capable of high-definition recording for 8 hours. I held it like a weapon, feeling its weight and potential. The installation of cameras revealed things about my house I'd never noticed in 5 years. Corners where shadows concealed tiny lenses, angles providing perfect sightlines down hallways, details only someone thinking like an investigator would recognize. The first camera went behind the living room bookshelf, positioned to capture the kitchen where Emily prepared evening tea. The second found home in a fake plant near the back door, motion-activated, infrared capable, viewing both the door and hallway to our bedroom. The third was most crucial, concealed in guest room crown molding, invisible from the bed but perfectly positioned to record everything. Each placement was deliberate, calculated for maximum evidence while remaining invisible. I found cold satisfaction in the technical aspects, methodical pleasure like designing load-bearing structures. But this wasn't engineering. This was war. During installation, I discovered details confirming my suspicions. Fresh scratches around the back door lock, barely visible unless you knew to look. Unfamiliar footprints in the garden, size 11 boots when I wore 10 and Emily wore 7. Guest room sheets smelled faintly of cologne I didn't recognize, expensive and aggressive. Someone had been in my house, using my guest room, moving through my home while I lay unconscious. Emily returned from book club with wine on her breath and rehearsed stories about other wives. She was more attentive than usual, asking about my day with interest that now seemed calculating. "You look tired," she observed, studying my face like a nurse assessing a patient. "Maybe try something stronger for sleep issues. I read about melatonin that might help." Every suggestion about sleep, every comment about tiredness, every offer felt like manipulation disguised as care. "Maybe," I agreed, accepting chamomile tea. "Whatever you think is best." But this time, I was ready. The tea tasted the same, slightly bitter, herbal, with lingering aftertaste. I drank normally while palming the small plastic bag I'd prepared. When Emily went to the bathroom, I quickly poured half the tea into the bag and sealed it, evidence for later testing. The grogginess hit around 10:30, right on schedule. Instead of fighting or surrendering completely, I practiced controlled breathing techniques I'd researched. Muscle relaxation exercises simulating deep sleep while maintaining awareness. Harder than expected. Drugs made concentration difficult, but determination kept me focused. Emily checked on me twice before midnight, testing responsiveness with gentle touches and whispered questions. Each time I maintained steady breathing while tracking her movements through barely opened eyelids. She studied me like a scientist observing an experiment, checking pulse and pupil dilation with practiced efficiency. This wasn't her first time drugging someone. Around midnight, I heard the soft click of the back door unlocking. My heart hammered, but I kept breathing controlled. Footsteps moved with practiced familiarity. Someone who'd made this journey before, knowing which floorboards creaked. Emily's breathing changed, becoming alert. She whispered something I couldn't make out, then slipped from bed with fluid movement. Through thin eyelash barriers, I watched her creep through our bedroom like a stranger, checking my breathing before padding toward the hallway. In walked Jake Morrison, Emily's ex-boyfriend from college, the same arrogant piece of work she'd sworn she'd cut ties with when we got engaged. Older now, softer around the middle, but still carrying cocky confidence. They moved through my house like they owned it, whispering in the kitchen like conspirators. I caught fragments, how he'll be out for hours, how they needed to be more careful about dosage, how Jake thought they should just tell him and get it over with, while Emily insisted on maintaining the arrangement. The arrangement. Like my marriage was a business deal with terms I'd never agreed to. They disappeared into the guest room with casual intimacy. The sounds that followed, muffled laughter, creaking bed springs, Emily's voice pitched in ways I hadn't heard in months, cut through pharmaceutical haze like broken glass. But instead of rage, I felt something colder. Clarity. This wasn't isolated incident or momentary weakness. This was systematic betrayal, carefully planned and executed with precision. I lay listening to my wife betray me 15 feet away and began planning her destruction with methodical patience of an engineer designing something built to last forever. The cameras were recording everything. The tea sample was sealed and ready for testing. Emily and Jake had provided enough evidence to end not just my marriage, but any chance Emily had of walking away with dignity or financial compensation. Tomorrow night would be their last performance. The morning routine had become theater, and I was ready for opening night. Emily brought coffee with the same concerned smile, asking about my sleep and suggesting new melatonin supplements from the pharmacy. "Doctor, Henry says they're more effective than chamomile," she explained, setting the bottle beside my cup like administering medication. "Maybe we should try a stronger approach." I accepted the bottle with appropriate gratitude, even asking her to remind me to take one before bed. The cruel irony wasn't lost, asking my wife to help me sleep while she'd been drugging me for months. The day crawled with agonizing slowness. Every hour brought me closer to the confrontation I'd planned for days. Cameras were charged, positioned perfectly, ready to capture everything. The tea sample waited in my desk drawer for laboratory confirmation. Emily spent the day unusually attentive, making my favorite lunch, asking about work with genuine-seeming interest, suggesting weekend getaways to reconnect. The performance was flawless, and if I hadn't known better, I might have been touched. But I was listening differently now. Every suggestion about relaxation felt like manipulation. Every touch felt calculated. Every concerned glance felt like a scientist checking her lab rat. Evening arrived with inevitable weight. Emily prepared chamomile tea with extra care, steeping longer and adding honey without being asked. She watched me drink with focused attention, making casual conversation while tracking every sip. "Drink it all," she encouraged when I paused. "It works better when you finish the whole cup." I drained the mug completely, complimenting the taste. The bitter aftertaste was stronger. She'd increased the dosage, probably at Jake's suggestion. The grogginess hit harder and faster. Emily helped me to bed with tender concern, tucking me in and kissing my forehead with lips that tasted like lies. "Sleep well, honey," she whispered, stroking my hair. "Sweet dreams." I maintained controlled breathing, letting my body relax while keeping my mind alert. The drugs made it difficult, but determination provided clarity no pharmaceutical could cloud. Emily changed into a black dress that hugged her figure, getting dressed for a date in her own house while her husband lay drugged in their marriage bed. She checked my breathing one final time, testing responsiveness with gentle shakes. Satisfied I was unconscious, she padded toward the back door. Jake arrived exactly at midnight, moving with confidence. They met in the kitchen with an embrace speaking of months of familiarity, whispering endearments like a couple reuniting after work. "He's completely out," Emily reported. "I increased the dosage like you suggested." "Good," Jake murmured. "Maybe it's time we stopped playing games and told him the truth." "Not yet," Emily insisted. "I need more time to document his mental instability, the sleep issues, paranoia, memory problems. It'll work in my favor during divorce. I can claim emotional abuse, maybe danger. Get a restraining order. Take half of everything." They discussed my destruction like planning a vacation, casual and thorough and without conscience. Emily described her strategy for portraying me as unstable. Jake worried about legal implications of drugging someone, but Emily dismissed concerns with chilling pragmatism. They moved to the guest room with practiced familiarity. The sounds that followed were worse than imagined, not just physical betrayal, but mocking commentary about my trusting nature, speculation about maintaining deception, Emily's cold calculation about maximizing divorce settlement. I lay listening to my wife plan my destruction while f***ing her ex-boyfriend, and felt something crystallize into pure, focused hatred. But hatred without strategy? is just noise. I waited until they were finished, relaxed and vulnerable. Then I sat up with deliberate slowness, letting my feet touch the floor with careful precision. The walk to the guest room felt like a funeral procession. I opened the door without knocking, stepping inside with controlled calm. Jake saw me first, satisfied expression dissolving into panic. He scrambled for clothes, stammering apologies that fell on deaf ears. "What the f***? How are you?" "Unconscious?" I completed calmly. "Like I have been every night for 3 months while you've been f***ing my wife in my house." Emily's reaction revealed her character. Not guilt or shame, but rapid calculation of how to regain narrative control. She tried denial first. "This isn't what it looks like. We were just talking. In the guest room. At midnight. While I was drugged with whatever you've been putting in my tea." Her expression shifted to justification. "You've been so distant, so cold. I needed someone who understood. Someone who could help you drug your husband and plan his financial destruction." That stopped her. Jake was pulling on pants with shaking hands. Emily's face cycled through expressions: shock, calculation, desperate bargaining. "We can work through this. Marriage counseling, fresh start. I'll end things with Jake." I walked to Jake with calm purpose. He was bigger, younger, probably stronger, but also naked, terrified and guilty as hell. I grabbed his arm and dragged him toward the back door with steady strength. "You can't just," Emily screamed, "remove an intruder from my house? Defend my home against someone breaking in for months?" I asked. I pushed Jake through the door into the yard, watching him stumble naked across grass. "Get off my property. If I see you again, I'll call police. Next time you want to f*** someone else's wife, don't do it while she's drugging her husband. That's felony assault." He ran naked into the night. Emily required surgical precision. She'd wrapped herself in a sheet, alternating between threats and bargaining. "You're making a huge mistake. I'll tell everyone you threw me out. I'll claim abuse, get a restraining order." "Will you?" I pulled my phone, showing her the live feed from the guest room camera. "After they see videos of you drugging me and f***ing Jake? After lab results on T samples I've been saving? After your voice is recorded planning my destruction?" Color drained from her face. "Those recordings are illegal," she stammered. "This is my house. I have every right to install security cameras on my property, especially when I suspect criminal activity." I pulled out suitcases from our closet, the same ones from our honeymoon. "Pack what you need. Everything else we'll sort through lawyers." "You can't throw me out," she pleaded. "It's not your house. The deed is in my name, bought with money I earned before we met." She packed with shaking hands. When she tried to take jewelry I'd given her, I stopped her. "Those stay. Collect personal belongings through your lawyer." At the front door, wrapped in a coat over her nightgown, Emily made her last stand. 8 years of marriage, and you're throwing it away over one mistake," she muttered. "One mistake?" This was months of systematic betrayal. Drugging me, manipulating me, planning my destruction. That's not a mistake. That's who you are. She left crying threats and promises. I watched her taillights disappear, then locked the door. The house felt different immediately. Lighter. Cleaner. For the first time in months, I fell asleep naturally and woke 8 hours later with a clear head and peace I'd forgotten was possible. 6 months later, I wake naturally at 6:30. No alarm needed, no grogginess clouding my thoughts. Morning sun streams through bedroom windows I now keep open, no longer afraid of what might enter while I sleep. The immediate aftermath was chaotic, but satisfying. Emily's furious parents arrived the next afternoon, prepared to confront me for humiliating their daughter. They came loaded for battle, ready to defend their precious child. They left 20 minutes later, stammering apologies and refusing eye contact. Video evidence had that effect. Hard to argue with high-definition footage of your daughter systematically drugging her husband while conducting an affair. Even harder when audio included her voice planning his psychological manipulation. "We had no idea," her mother whispered as they retreated. "Emily told us you were having mental health issues, becoming paranoid and controlling." "Maybe ask yourselves where she learned to lie so convincingly," I'd replied. Divorce proceedings were swift and decisive. Emily's shark lawyer advised immediate capitulation once presented with evidence. Video documentation of adultery was damaging enough, but systematic spousal drugging crossed into criminal territory no family court judge would ignore. Emily's attempts to claim half of everything were complicated by inconvenient facts. The house was mine, purchased before marriage with saved money. Cars were in my name. Even joint savings was funded primarily by my engineering salary, while Emily's part-time bookkeeping contributed maybe 20%. She walked away with personal belongings, half the joint savings, and shattered pride. No alimony. Adultery clauses are wonderful when properly documented. No claim to house or retirement accounts. Just consequences. The social fallout was swift and merciless. Emily's affair became public knowledge when Jake's wife discovered everything. Linda Morrison was less forgiving. She took Jake for everything and made sure everyone knew why their marriage ended. Emily lost her part-time job when word reached her boss. She moved back with her parents, a 40-year-old woman reduced to her childhood bedroom because elaborate schemes had collapsed spectacularly. But real victory wasn't Emily's downfall. It was recovering my own mind and autonomy. The adjustment period of sleeping naturally again, trusting my own perceptions, no longer questioning memories or second-guessing instincts. Those first weeks were harder than expected. My body had become dependent on Emily's drugs, and withdrawal brought challenges, insomnia, anxiety, crushing doubt about whether I'd done the right thing. Then I'd remember Emily's voice discussing my destruction with casual cruelty, and doubts would evaporate. I've begun dating again, cautiously, but without paranoia that might have consumed a weaker man. Sarah from the coffee shop, a divorcee with her own betrayal experiences. We move slowly, building trust through demonstrated actions rather than pretty words. Trust, but verify, she says with a smile, holding hard-won wisdom. Reagan was talking about nuclear treaties, but it works for relationships too. I've learned to value my own perception above others' reassurances, to trust my gut even when my heart wants to believe otherwise. The most loving thing you can sometimes do is refuse to enable destructive behavior, even when that someone is your wife. Emily, I heard through mutual friends, struggled with unemployment and isolation before finding work at a strip mall tax preparation chain. Her attempts to portray herself as victim of an abusive marriage fell flat when evidence of systematic deception became public. I feel no satisfaction in her struggles, just quiet acknowledgement that actions have consequences, even for people who believe they're clever enough to avoid them. The house that was once a prison has become a sanctuary. I no longer check door locks obsessively or test drinks for foreign substances. The guest room has been converted into a home office, space for building something new rather than hiding something shameful. The back door has a different lock now, though I rarely think about that detail. The kitchen where Emily prepared drugged tea has been remodeled, symbolic fresh start serving practical purposes too. My morning routine belongs to me again. Coffee made to exact preferences, news checked at my own pace, schedule planned according to my priorities. I step into each day with complete confidence in my own perceptions. This morning, like every morning for 6 months, I stand in my kitchen holding coffee I made myself, looking out at a garden where no unwanted footprints disturb the soil. I used to think insomnia was my enemy. Now I know the real enemy was the sleep I didn't choose, and the woman who chose it for me. These days, I sleep like a baby and wake up like a king. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. The scent hit me like a physical blow. Laura's perfume. That expensive vanilla and sandalwood blend she'd started wearing 6 months ago. I was bent over the engine of a rusted Toyota in my Dayton garage when the memory crashed through 5 years of carefully constructed walls. For a moment, I wasn't Mark Ellis anymore. I was Ethan Caldwell, standing in my laundry room in Bloomington on a Thursday night that changed everything. Thursday, October 15th, 2020, laundry night. I had been methodical about everything in those days. Thursday was laundry. Saturday was groceries. Sunday was family dinner, though family had become increasingly loose. Laura worked marketing at the insurance company. Mason was 17, more interested in his phone than conversation. Lily was 15 and already showing signs of entitled attitude. I was sorting through the week's clothes when something crinkled in Laura's coat pocket. The receipt fell to the concrete floor like a confession. The Marriott, downtown Bloomington, room charge $189.00. Date, September 22nd, 2020. September 22nd. I remembered that date perfectly because I'd worked a double shift, sleeping in my truck between crews rather than drive home for 4 hours. Laura had texted around midnight. Working late on the Morrison account. Don't wait up. The receipt felt heavier than paper should. Room service charges, $67.50. 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine. I stood there in that buzzing fluorescent light, holding proof of my wife's betrayal, and felt relief. Not the sharp pain I'd expected, but relief. For months I'd been living with this gnawing sense that something was wrong, that I was slowly going crazy. The distance, the late meetings, how Laura flinched when I touched her unexpectedly. Now I knew I wasn't crazy. I was methodical, even then. I photographed the receipt from 3 angles, noted the timestamp, room number, itemized charges. Then I folded it carefully and placed it back exactly where I'd found it. Laura was already in bed when I came upstairs, lying on her side, facing away, her breathing too even to be natural sleep. I undressed quietly and slid between sheets that smelled like her new perfume and something else. Something masculine and expensive that wasn't me. "How was work?" she asked softly. "Fine," I said, because what else was there to say? She made a small sound that might have been relief. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night," I replied. But I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe, thinking about 20 years of marriage and how it felt to discover that the person sleeping next to you had become a complete stranger. At 2 a.m., I gave up pretending. I dressed quietly and drove to the Marriott, parking across the street where I could see the lobby. Everything looked normal and mundane, just a hotel doing business in the early hours. But somewhere in that building, my wife had betrayed 20 years of marriage. I sat in my truck until dawn, watching that lobby, understanding with perfect clarity that my life as Ethan Caldwell was ending. The voice in my head kept trying to find innocent explanations, but my gut knew better. My gut had been screaming the truth for months, while my brain made excuses. I'd been suffocating under the weight of being not enough for so long that I'd almost convinced myself it was normal. Not exciting enough, not successful enough, not ambitious enough. Just Ethan Caldwell, shift worker and husband, trying to hold together a family that had already decided he didn't matter. The receipt changed everything, because it gave me permission to stop pretending. Over the following 2 weeks, I became a ghost in my own life. I went through the motions of being a husband and father while systematically documenting the decay of everything I'd spent 20 years building. The methodical part of me, the part that troubleshot complex machinery at the plant, took over completely. Laura's second phone was the first breakthrough. I found it wedged between her car seat and center console while she was inside the grocery store. An iPhone with a pink case I'd never seen, password protected, but warm from recent use. I didn't try to break into it. Instead, I memorized the number from the lock screen and photographed the device from every angle, noting exactly where I'd found it before sliding it back. When Laura returned with groceries, chattering about sales and expenses, I helped her load bags and said nothing about the secret phone 3 feet away. The credit card statements were easier. Laura handled our finances but had grown careless about hiding papers. 3 different restaurants I'd never been to, all expensive places downtown. Charges that corresponded perfectly with her working late nights. Always for 2 people. Appetizers, 2 entrees, wine, dessert. I photographed every statement, every suspicious charge, building a timeline clearer than any private investigator could have provided. My wife wasn't just cheating, she was living an entire double life, funded by our joint account while I picked up extra shifts to cover what I thought were legitimate business expenses. But I needed to know who. The answer came Wednesday evening, when I followed her from her office building. She'd texted about working late again, but instead of staying downtown, she drove to the kind of neighborhood where houses had circular driveways and 3-car garages. She pulled into the driveway of a Tudor-striped house with perfect landscaping. Instead of knocking like a visitor, she walked to a side entrance and used a key like she belonged there. Grant Whitaker. I recognized him now. Successful insurance executive, country club member, married to a woman who volunteered at the children's hospital. I'd seen his picture in the business journal, read about his promotion to regional manager. He was everything I wasn't. Expensive suits, manicured hands, smooth confidence that came from never worrying about overtime pay or electric bills. The kind of man who could afford $189, 0-cent hotel rooms and wine that cost more than my weekly groceries. I sat in my truck for 2 hours, watching warm light in the windows, knowing my wife was inside living a life I could never provide. When she finally emerged, hair mussed and lipstick gone, she looked younger than she had in years. Happier. More alive than I'd seen her since our early marriage. That should have been the worst part, seeing her happiness with another man. But it wasn't. The worst part came later, when I walked into our kitchen and saw Mason and Lily with brand new iPhones. Not the basic model we'd discussed for Lily's birthday, but premium versions, with all the upgrades. "Where did these come from?" I asked. Mason barely looked up from his device. "Mom's friend Grant got them for us, early birthday presents." The casual way he said it hit like a punch. Mom's friend Grant. Lily glanced up with mild teenage annoyance. "He's been helping out while you're always working. He actually cares about what we want." The words were delivered with such offhand cruelty that I couldn't speak. My children were talking about my wife's lover like he was a family friend who deserved their gratitude more than I did. "How long have you known him?" I managed. Mason shrugged. "Few months. He takes us to nice restaurants sometimes. Better than the chain places you pick. He's really successful," Lily added, scrolling through apps. "He knows about technology and investment, important things." The implication hung in the air. "Unlike you, Dad. Unlike your shift work and used truck. And careful budgeting for things we couldn't really afford." They weren't innocent victims of their mother's affair. They were willing participants who had chosen comfort over loyalty, expensive gifts over integrity. They knew exactly what was happening and decided Grant Whitaker's money was worth more than their father's love. That night I sat alone in our living room after everyone had gone to bed, surrounded by the life I'd worked 20 years to build, understanding it had been built on sand. The house payments I'd never missed, the college funds I'd contributed to religiously, the family dinners and birthday parties, none of it mattered to the people I'd done it for. Laura came downstairs around midnight, standing in the doorway in her robe, looking concerned in that practiced way that now seemed completely false. "Are you okay, honey? You seem stressed lately," she asked. I looked at her and saw a stranger wearing my wife's face. "I'm fine, just thinking." She sat on my chair's arm, putting her hand on my shoulder in a gesture that once would have comforted me. Now it felt like performance. "Maybe you should take time off. You've been working such long hours. The kids and I barely see you anymore." The kids and I. Like we were separate entities, like I was the outsider who needed to work harder to earn a place in my own family. Maybe I should, I agreed, because I'd already started planning something she couldn't imagine. But I wasn't planning to confront them. Confrontation would only give them a chance to lie better, to gaslight me into believing I was imagining things. I was planning something much more permanent, much more final. I was planning to disappear. The week I spent planning my disappearance was the most focused I'd ever been. Every decision was deliberate, calculated to cause maximum long-term impact with minimal immediate drama. While Laura continued her affair and my children enjoyed their new phones, I systematically dismantled the financial foundation they'd taken for granted. The joint savings account was first. $23,000, accumulated over years of overtime and careful budgeting. Money saved for Mason's college, for Lily's wedding, for the Colorado vacation we'd never taken. I withdrew it all over 3 days, using different branches, converting most to cashier's checks made out to Mark Ellis, an identity I'd been building with help from the internet and a birth certificate belonging to a man who'd died young in Pennsylvania. My tools came next. Thousands of dollars worth of professional equipment accumulated over years. I sold everything to a dealer in Indianapolis, driving 3 hours each way to avoid questions. The buyer asked nothing about why I needed cash, just counted out $6,700 and helped me load his truck. The wedding ring I'd worn for 20 years came off easier than expected. I sold it to a pawn shop in another town, along with my watch and the gold chain my parents had given me for graduation. Through it all, I maintained perfect normalcy at home. I kissed Laura goodbye each morning, helped Lily with homework, asked Mason about college applications. They were so absorbed in their new reality that they never saw the systematic destruction happening in front of them. The confrontation came Saturday morning. Laura was making pancakes, humming that song she'd been playing since the affair started. Mason was texting. Lily was complaining about school drama. I placed the manila folder on the counter next to the syrup bottle. "What's this?" Laura asked, spatula frozen mid-flip. "Open it," I replied. Her face went white. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, screenshots of restaurant charges, photos of her using Grant's key, bank records showing exactly how much of our money she'd spent on her affair. "Even I can explain," she stammered. "Don't," I replied. Laura's hands shook as she flipped through the evidence. "This isn't what you think. Grant is just a friend." She hesitated. "Room 314 at the Marriott? September 22nd, October 3rd, October 17th. I recited dates from memory. Chez Laurent, October 8th. Magnolia Bistro, October 15th. Should I continue? The spatula clattered the floor. "You've been spying on me." "I've been paying attention," I shot back. That's when Mason and Lily walked in, seeing the papers spread across the counter, seeing their mother's tears, seeing me standing like a judge, delivering verdict. Instead of shock or horror, I saw irritation, annoyance that their secret was out. "We knew you'd react like this," Mason said with teenage exhaustion, all crazy and possessive. "Grant's a good guy, Dad. He treats Mom better than you do." The words came out so casually, with such certainty, that I felt something break inside my chest. Lily nodded in agreement. "He actually listens when she talks. And he takes us places without making a big deal about money all the time." There it was, the truth laid bare by my own children. I wasn't a betrayed husband. I was an inconvenience, a source of financial stability who couldn't compete with Grant's generous affections. "I'm leaving," I said. Laura's face crumpled. "Ethan, please. We can work through this. I'll never see him again." But her promises meant nothing. Even if sincere, the damage was complete. She'd made her choice months ago, and my children had made theirs when they decided Grant's gifts were worth more than their father's love. I packed one duffel bag, 20 years of life reduced to clothes and necessities. I left my wedding ring on the dresser next to Laura's jewelry box. The last thing I heard was Lily asking Laura, "Does this mean we have to give back the phones?" I drove toward Dayton in my old pickup, feeling lighter with every mile. The radio played classic rock, songs from when I'd believed in forever and family and the reward of doing right. But I didn't feel angry, I didn't feel sad, I felt free. Mark Ellis was born on that highway, somewhere between Bloomington and Dayton, in a pickup that smelled like motor oil and possibility. Ethan Caldwell died quietly, without ceremony, in a kitchen full of people who'd already forgotten he was supposed to matter. 5 years passed like seasons changing, gradual, inevitable, surprisingly peaceful. Mark Ellis built a life in Dayton with methodical patience. I rented the apartment above Rosie's Diner on Oak Street, took a job at Murphy's Auto Repair, and settled into a routine that never varied. Murphy was a 60-year-old Irishman who asked no questions about my past and cared only that I could diagnose engine problems by sound. The other mechanics accepted me as easily as they'd accepted new equipment. I became known for impossible cases, cars other shops couldn't diagnose, vintage engines requiring intuition more than computers. My apartment was sparse but comfortable. A bed, kitchen table, television I rarely watched. Books filled empty spaces. Technical manuals and biographies of men who'd built empires from nothing. I adopted Rex from the county shelter, a German Shepherd mix abandoned by previous owners. We understood each other perfectly. The ghost years taught me something I'd never learned as Ethan Caldwell. Contentment wasn't about having everything you wanted. It was about wanting only what you could provide for yourself. On a gray October morning in 2025, 5 years almost to the day since I'd driven away from Bloomington, Lily walked into Murphy's garage. I was diagnosing a misfire in a 1987 Mustang when I heard footsteps. Something about the cadence made me look up, and there she was, 20 years old now, thin and hollow-eyed in a way that spoke of years carrying weight too heavy for her shoulders. She'd grown up to look like her mother, but where Laura had always carried confidence, Lily seemed diminished. Second-hand clothes, but clean, hair longer than I remembered, face marked by premature seriousness that comes from learning hard lessons young. "Hello, Dad." The word hung between us like smoke. I straightened slowly, wiping hands on a rag. "Lily." She shifted nervously, clutching a purse against her chest. "You're hard to find. Mark Ellis, Dayton, Ohio. Took me 2 years and a private investigator." "You hired a private investigator?" I asked. "I saved for 18 months, worked 2 jobs. She looked around the garage. "You look different, older." "5 years will do that," I replied. "You look happy," she said, sounding surprised. I studied her face, looking for traces of the entitled teenager who'd casually destroyed her family for an iPhone. I found someone else entirely, someone who'd learned what consequences felt like. "Where are you here, Lily?" I asked. The question deflated her. She looked down, gathering courage. "I need to tell you what happened after you left. We walked to Rosie's Diner, where coffee was strong and booths high enough for private conversations. Rosie brought us mugs and pie without being asked." Lily wrapped her hands around her mug like stealing its warmth. "Mom filed for divorce 6 months after you left, claimed abandonment, told everyone you were unstable, that you'd run from responsibilities." The words felt like weather reports from a distant climate. Someone else's pain in someone else's life. "Grant's wife found out about the affair 2 months after you disappeared," Lily continued. "Patricia found hotel receipts in his car. She went completely insane, came to our house screaming, calling Mom names, threatening to destroy her reputation." I sipped coffee and waited. But that wasn't the worst part. Patricia waited for Grant in his driveway one evening. When he came home, she shot him. The words hit like cold water. She killed him? 3 times in the chest, then called 911 and waited for police. Lily's hands shook. The whole thing was in newspapers. Local executive murdered by jealous wife. Mom's name was in every article as the other woman. Grant Whitaker, the successful executive who'd bought my children's loyalty with expensive gifts, was dead. Murdered by his wife in a crime that had probably destroyed multiple families. Mom lost her job 3 weeks later. The company said downsizing, but everyone knew it was the scandal. No one in Bloomington would hire her. She tried Indianapolis, but the story had spread. The systematic destruction was becoming clear. Laura's comfortable double life hadn't just ended. It had exploded, spectacularly. Mason left for college and never came home. Even on breaks. He blamed Mom for everything, said she'd embarrassed the family beyond repair. He won't take her calls. And you? I asked. Lily's laugh was bitter. I stayed. Somebody had to. We lost the house, couldn't make payments without your income. She's working as a waitress now, making barely enough for rent on a one-bedroom apartment. This young woman bore no resemblance to the spoiled teenager who defended Grant Whitaker. She'd been forced to grow up quickly, to face consequences her 15-year-old self never could have imagined. She cries every night, keeps your old photos on her nightstand and never took off her wedding ring. She talks about you like you might come back someday. Something twisted in my chest. Not quite sympathy, but not indifference either. She knows she destroyed everything. But knowing doesn't fix anything. It just makes the nights longer. We sat in silence, listening to the diner's background noise. Grills sizzling, customers talking, life continuing around our small island of reckoning. I'm sorry, Lily finally said, for what I said in the kitchen, for choosing his gifts over your love, for not seeing what we were doing. The apology was genuine but also desperate, less about my forgiveness and more about her need for absolution. We were kids, she added. You were 17 and 15, I said gently. Old enough to understand loyalty, old enough to know actions have consequences. Her face crumpled. I know. I've had 5 years to think about it. That man who bought us phones, we never really knew him. He was a stranger who died violently and left nothing but scandal, and we chose him over you. The pain in her voice was real, but so was the calculation. Lily had come not just to apologize, but to see if anything could be salvaged. Is that why you're here, to apologize? She looked up with eyes older than 20 should be. I'm here because I love you, and because I've spent 5 years learning to live with what we did. Because Mom is broken and Mason won't talk to any of us, and I don't know how to fix anything. There it was. Not just guilt, but hope. Hope that I might restore the stability they'd thrown away. I forgave you long ago, I said. All of you. Carrying anger was like carrying hot coals. It only burned me. Relief flooded her face. So you'll come back? You'll come home? The question hung like a bridge I had no intention of crossing. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, Lily. I forgave you so I could move on, not so you could feel better. Her face fell. But we're family. No. We were family. Past tense. Family requires loyalty, trust, mutual respect. What we had was people sharing a house who decided a stranger's money was worth more than a father's love. The words were delivered without anger, just cold finality. Lily began to cry. Not manipulative tears, but genuine grief of someone who'd finally understood that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. I paid for coffee and walked her to the bus station. She hugged me goodbye, and I let her, because she needed that connection, even if it meant nothing to me. I love you, Dad, she whispered. I know, I said. I loved you too. Her past tense. The most honest words I'd spoken in 5 years. 6 months after Lily's visit, Mark Ellis had settled deeper into his new identity. I'd bought a small house on the outskirts of Dayton, adopted a dog from the local shelter, and begun dating a divorced teacher named Carol who asked no questions about my past. Laura's cafe had closed and she'd moved to another state to escape the judgment of Bloomington. Mason graduated college but hadn't spoken to his mother in 2 years. Lily worked at a nonprofit, trying to rebuild her life while carrying the weight of my rejection. I sometimes thought about my old life, but it felt like remembering a movie I'd once watched, rather than something I'd lived. I wasn't the same man who'd once desperately wanted to be enough for people who never valued what I offered. Mark Ellis was harder, more self-contained, but also more authentic. I'd finally become the man I needed to be, instead of the man others demanded. Carol and I had developed something real, not the desperate codependence I'd mistaken for love in my first marriage, but mutual respect between two people who'd learned to be complete on their own. We talked about small things, her students, my repair jobs, the weather. It was peaceful in a way I'd never experienced during 20 years of walking on eggshells. "You're different from other divorced men," she told me one evening as we sat on my back porch. "Most are either bitter about their ex-wives or still carrying torches. You seem resolved." "I made peace with letting go," I said, and it was true. The private investigator's report had arrived 3 weeks earlier, Lily's doing, apparently, wanting to check on me from a distance. It contained the basic facts of Mark Ellis's life: employed mechanic, homeowner, dog owner, relationship with local teacher. No criminal record, no debts, no complications. A perfectly ordinary existence, which was exactly what I'd wanted. Rex was aging but still enthusiastic about our morning walks. At 7 years old, he'd learned to trust that I wouldn't abandon him the way his previous owners had. We understood each other completely. Two creatures who'd been discarded and found better lives because of it. Murphy had started hinting about retirement, suggesting the right person might take over the garage. The idea appealed to me, not because I needed to build something impressive, but because I'd found work that satisfied me and customers who appreciated competent service without drama. On quiet evenings, I reflected on the mathematics of revenge. Most people imagined it required elaborate schemes, dramatic confrontations, complex plans designed to inflict maximum suffering. But the most effective revenge was much simpler: building a better life and refusing to let the people who'd hurt you participate in it. The Ethan Caldwell who'd discovered that hotel receipt had been desperate for validation from people who'd already decided he wasn't worth their full attention. He'd measured his success by their happiness, his identity by their approval, his worth by their satisfaction. Mark Ellis had learned to measure his worth by his own standards. He'd discovered that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And indifference, it turned out, was the most powerful weapon of all. Late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd look at myself in the bathroom mirror. The face looking back was older, marked by years of honest work and simple living, but the eyes were clearer than they'd been in decades, free from the desperate need to be enough for people who decided I wasn't. Mark Ellis, I'd say quietly, testing the name, that had become more real than the one I'd been born with. The man in the mirror would nod back, satisfied with the trade he'd made, surrendering a family that had never really valued him in exchange for a life built on his own terms, free from the exhausting work of trying to earn love from people who'd proven themselves incapable of giving it. The story ended with me working in my garage, content in my solitude, understanding that the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's simply refusing to let people who betrayed you have any place in the life you build afterward. The final image was of me looking at myself in my bathroom mirror, seeing Mark Ellis instead of Ethan Caldwell, and feeling genuinely at peace with the trade. It was the best deal I'd ever made. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.